Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, Part 2. Introduction. This Dharma talk is covering two main topics. First, a practical security warning about two suspicious visitors who entered the monastery under false pretenses, prompting us new rules about verifying outsiders. Second, the life story of Huineng, the Sixth Patriarch, focusing on how this illiterate woodcutter achieved such enlightenment upon hearing just a single line from the Diamond Sutra. Abiding nowhere, let the mind arise. How his understanding surpassed that of even knowledgeable monks. The main teaching is that the true Buddha nature has no form to be dirtied or polished, and that liberation comes not only from detachment in a passive sense, but from responding to life freely and clearly without clinging or aversion. Namo Bổn Sư Thích Ca Mâu Ni Phật. Good morning, everyone. I want to begin by explaining why we're starting about 15 minutes late today. Around noon, two strangers arrived at our gates in front of the monastery. It was a man and a woman. The woman was dressed Indian-style clothing. The man, he wore yellow sarong. They both weren't Vietnamese, but they came inside and claimed they were spiritual teachers who wanted to come in and share their teachings. I told them simply, have some food first, and if you want to teach me first. If I find your teaching has merits, then maybe I'll let you teach my disciples. So they went down to eat. I thought they had finished and left. But around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, while I was sitting and chanting in my room, I noticed a terrible smell. It was not just unpleasant, but it had a heavy, suffocating odor. The kind of smell that an experienced practitioner like myself recognized as a sign of something spiritually impure has entered the space. I opened my door, and there they were, still wandering around the village in midday heat. I went to ask our gatekeeper how they had gotten in. Apparently, one of our guest monks, Bhikkhu Tunan, had let them in, claiming they had already received permission from the master. No one even thought of verifying this. No one had even checked with me. And this is unacceptable. Please, everyone, from this day forward, I'm speaking to both villages and also the entire network of the Tham Nguyen community. Anyone from outside who wishes to enter must properly introduce by any one of the known members, and they must state their purpose clearly. There is no exceptions. When I had their ID photograph, I noticed something troubled. On the identification document itself, there was Sanskrit mantras printed. the kind used in Bakramanaka ritual magic. That was not an accident. I am posting their photographs on my Facebook page tonight so every community in our network can be on alert. Their vehicle number and IDs have been documented. Do not be careless. We live in a time when harmful spiritual practices, dark rituals, manipulation, exploitation are very, very real. One of my long-term disciples were harmed after following energy healing practitioner. Someone else I know suffered similar consequences. 2 people I care about became victims. I would not allow this to happen here. With that warning given, let me turn to what I had prepared for today's lecture. And today's lecture is on the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch in the translation made by my Dharma uncle. We begin with the chapter called Autobiographical Accounts. This is where the Sixth Patriarch, Huineng, tells his own story of his life. Part 1. The young woodcutter who heard one line. Huineng was an uneducated young man from a poor family. His father had died when he was very young, and he spent most of his days cutting and selling firewood to support his elderly mother. One afternoon, he delivered firewood to a wealthy shop owner. As he paid, he heard someone inside reciting a sutra. And that is the Diamond Sutra. He didn't know at that time it was called the Diamond Sutra. He didn't even know at the time that it was even a sutra. But when he heard one line, and that line reached his ears, his entire body shook. That line was, "Abiding nowhere, let the mind arise. Ying Wung Shu Zhu, Xing Wing Zeng." He felt the hair on the back of his head stand. Something awakened inside him that he had and he could not describe, no words for. When he finally paid, he asked the shop owner what he was reciting. The man replied it was the Diamond Sutra, and that his own father, the 5th Patriarch, Hung Gren, taught him at the monastery called Dangshang. And it was about a month's walk away. Huineng then said, "I would give anything if I could just go there and study. But my mother, she is very old and cannot be left alone. Who would care for her if I were to go?" The shop owner, the man, he was moved by the saying. He and his wife gave Huineng 10 tassels of silver and gold, not for the road, but to hire someone to care for his mother while he was gone, and to the monastery called Dangshang. Huineng accepted the silver and gold, found a family in the village willing to take on this task and watch over his mother, he bowed to her 3 times and he set out on foot. After a month of walking barefoot in torn clothes, carrying his belonging in 2 baskets, one of the baskets for clothes and the other was for rice, he arrived at the monastery. Part 2. Why does a barbarian think he can become a Buddha? When Huineng arrived at Dangshan, the 5th Patriarch was teaching from his seat in the lecture hall. Huineng walked in and he bowed. The 5th Patriarch looked down at this ragged, dark-skinned man from the southern borderlands and said sharply to him, where are you from and what do you want? Huineng replied, I am from the south and I have come here to become a Buddha. The 5th Patriarch said, you are a southerner? A barbarian? How could someone like you even think of becoming a Buddha? And Huineng replied, without hesitation, without defensiveness, calm as a still pond. A young person's body may be from the north or the south, but Buddha's nature has no direction, no north or south. Your body and your mind are different, but my Buddha nature and your Buddha nature, aren't they the same? Are they not different? After this question, the hall was quiet. The 5th Patriarch knew immediately that this was no ordinary person. But he said nothing to reveal this. He said, only go down to the kitchen and find someone to hold rice. And with that, Huineng went. Part 3. 8 months in the kitchen. For 8 months, Huineng worked in the kitchen. He hauled rice. He washed plates. He carried water. He was small, about less than 45 kilograms. The stone pestle required 70 kilograms of downward force to operate. So he tried large rocks to his waist and stood on the pedestal, bouncing up and down with extra weight all day long. He never even went to the lecture hall. He never attended formal teaching. He was never asked to. If you had been treated this way, sent to work in the kitchen, ignored, and never taught, would you have stayed? Most people would have left. Most people would have been humiliated and given up. But for Huineng, it did not. He stayed because he understood something profoundly important. He had already been awakened when he heard that one line. He didn't come to Dangshan to learn. He came to have been awakened and confirmed. He had come to have his awakening confirmed. Part 4. The Contest of Understanding. After 8 months, the 5th Patriarch announced to all his monks, each of you should write a verse expressing your understanding. Whoever truly understands Buddha nature will receive the bowl and robe and become the 6th Patriarch. Now, the most respected monk at the monastery, who was the senior teaching, his name was Shenzhou. He was brilliant, learned, revered by everyone. Over 1,000 monks assumed then transmission would surely go to him. Shinzu composed a verse and secretly wrote it on the wall of the corridors at night. The body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a bright mirror standing. Polish it diligently. Do not let dust settle. The Fifth Patriarch saw the verse. He praised it publicly. He told all the monks to recite it. He said reciting this verse would prevent one from falling into the lower realm. But that night alone, he went to Shang Zu's room and said quietly to him, "You have written a good verse, but you have not yet seen your original nature. You're still standing outside the door, not inside. Now go and write me another." Shinzu tried to for 4 days. 13 times he walked toward the patriarch chamber, and 13 times he turned back. He could not produce another verse. Part 5. The illiterate man's answer. Meanwhile, Huineng was in the kitchen, still holding rice. A young novelist monk walked past him, singing Shinzu's verse. Huineng listened and understood immediately that the verse, while beautiful, had not yet reached Buddha's nature. He said to the novice, "I have a verse too, but I cannot read or write. Would you take me to see the verse on the wall and read it to me?" A government official who happened to be visiting agreed to read it aloud for him. And then Huineng dictated his own verse. Here it is. Bodhi is fundamentally without any tree. The bright mirror is also not a stand. Fundamentally, there is not a single thing. Where could any dust alight? The teaching behind the two verses. Do you see the difference? Shengzheng verse says, "The mind is like a bright mirror. Polish it constantly, so no dust settles." That is good practice. That is sincere effort. But it assumes Buddha nature has a form, something that can be gathered, and gathering dust, something that needs cleaning. Huineng's verse says, there is no tree, there is no mirror stand, there is not even a single thing. Where could dust possibly settle? Huineng understood that Buddha's nature has no shape, no form, no surface. You cannot dust something that has no form. You cannot clean something that will never soil. That there is the difference between standing inside the door and standing outside. Part 6. The secret transmission. When the Fifth Patriarch saw the crowd gathering excitedly around Huineng's verse, he was alarmed. He knew that jealousy and danger would follow. So he took his sandals, wiped it away from Huineng's verse himself, telling the crowd, "This verse also has not seen original nature." This confused everyone. They went back to reciting Shu Xing's verse. But at midnight, the Fifth Patriarch went quietly into the kitchen. He knocked on the mortar 3 times with his staff. Huineng understood the signal. At the third watch of the night, in total darkness and secrecy, Huineng slipped into the patriarch's room. There, for the first time in 8 months, Huineng formally received the 3 refuge and 5 precepts. The 5th patriarch placed his robe over them, both to block out any light from showing. And then he lectured the entire Diamond Sutra, privately, slowly, and completely. When he reached the line, abiding nowhere, let the mind arise, Huineng was fully and completely awakened. He bowed low and said, "Who could have known that Buddha nature is originally pure? Who could have known that Buddha's nature neither arises nor ceases? Who could have known that Buddha's nature is originally and complete in itself? Who could have known that Buddha's nature does not waver? Who could have known that Buddha's nature gives birth to all phenomena?" The 5th patriarch then gave Huineng the robe and bowl, the symbol of Dharma transmission, and said to him, "You are now the 6th patriarch. Take care of yourself. Leave immediately. Go south. Do not teach the 16 years. Do not teach for 16 years. If you teach too soon, you will be in danger." And he personally rowed Huineng across the river before dawn. Part 7. When I was lost, you rowed me. Now I am awake. I row myself. At the river's edge, the 5th patriarch picked up the oar. Huineng gently took it from him and said, "When I was lost, it was right for you to carry me across. Now that I have awakened, I cross by myself." The 5th patriarch smiled, and he let go of the oar. This single exchange contains the entire teaching. Before awakening, we needed a teacher, a community, a practice, a structure. However, after awakening, we carry ourselves. But we will never forget who first held the oar. Part 8. Don't think good. Don't think evil. After Huineng escaped south and went into hiding for 16 years, living among hunters, secretly releasing trapped animals at night, eating only vegetables, he eventually emerged to teach. But before he could even reach a monastery, he was chased by a mob of over 100 monks carrying knives and clubs, who was sent to take back the robe and bowl. The fastest among them was a former military general named Huineng. He caught up with Huineng first. Huineng placed the robe and bowl on a rock and stepped aside. Huineng reached for the robe. However, he could not even lift it. He pulled the robe with all his strength, and still he could not move it. Humbled, he called out, "I came for the Dharma, not the robe. Please teach me." Huineng came out of hiding and sat beside him. He said, "Do not think of good. Do not think of evil. Right now, in this very moment, what is your original face?" Huineng was silent, and then he understood. He asked, "But Master Hongren always taught us to practice goodness. Why do you say don't think of good?" Huineng replied, "Thinking good leads to heaven, but heaven's merits runs out. Then what? Thinking evil leads to hell. But when the punishment ends, you return to human life. Accumulate causes. Fall again. This cycle has no end. Stop thinking good. Stop thinking evil. Detach from all conditions. In that very moment, that is your original face. That is your Buddha's nature. Huineng understood completely. He bowed 3 times and called Huineng his master, his teacher. The central teaching. What is abiding nowhere? Let me explain the phrase that started everything. The line Huineng heard in the woodcutter's yard. Abiding nowhere, let the mind arise. What does this mean? Every moment our mind is clinging to something. We love something. We hate something. We are indifferent to something. These are the 3 states our mind is always cycling through. When the eyes sees a beautiful form, the mind clings to it. When the ears hears pleasant words, the mind clings to it. When we taste something delicious, the mind clings to the experience. This clinging is called the 6 sense organs attaching to the 6 sense objects. And this attachment is what creates karma and keeps us in the cycle of rebirth. But when the 6th sense organ encounters the 6 sense objects without clinging, that is called Buddha's mind. The same eyes, the same ears, the same nose, the same tongue, the same body, the same sights, sounds, smell, taste, touch, but no gasping, no pushing away, no being swept along. That non-clinging is liberation. Now, and at this important, one of my disciples heard this teaching and thought, if I don't cling to anything, then I should just let everything pass. My nephew uses drugs and I should simply not care. No, that is wrong. That clinging is emptiness, and we just another form. And that is just another form of attachment. When the great Bodhisattva Dharmakriti said he was sick because all beings are sick, he didn't mean he did nothing. He meant he acted for compassion, not for ego. He was fully present. He responded. He intervened. The monk who said, I practice no attachment, while watching his nephew destroy himself with drugs, that is not non-attachment. That is abandonment dressed in Buddhist language. Ordinary mind is the way. Hungry, eat. Tired, sleep. Nephew is doing wrong. Speak to him. Nephew is doing well. Praise him. That is normal, healthy, appropriate response. That is the way. The grandmother who used to scream at her grandson and now sits quietly while he smokes drugs in her room has not achieved enlightenment. She has simply swapped one form of clinging for another. Why the heavenly realms are harder to practice in. The 5th Patriarch told a monk who wanted to be reborn in the heavens, I have taught you for 20 years and you still only want heavenly rebirth. Heaven is harder to practice in than the human realm. Why? It seems absurd, doesn't it? Heaven means beauty, abundance, no suffering. Why would that be harder to practice it? This is why. In the heavenly realm, beings have divine hearing. They can hear everything, every conversation in every corner of every realm. They can hear your thoughts. Imagine sitting in meditation while hearing thousands of voices simultaneously, unable to tune out any of them. In the heavenly realm, beings have sought divine sight. They can see the past karma of every person they encounter. Imagine seeing someone who has murdered your father in a previous life. Can you sit with them peacefully? In the heavenly realm, there is no sleep. The mind is always active, always perceiving, always processing. How do you find stillness? And so the Buddha said, the human realm is the most precious. We can choose what to hear and what to ignore. We can sleep and rest the mind. We can forget our past lives and encounter people fresh. We don't know enough to be overwhelmed. This human mind, with all its limitations, is the most perfect vehicle for awakening. Please don't take it for granted. Before I close, I want to say something about Dharma linkage. Because this sutra is not just historical, it is personal. The Sixth Patriarch line was transmitted from generations after generation, and it reached Venerable Huineng, and through him to our community. The character Hum is your Dharma name. That Hum comes directly from this linkage, and it means vast and great. It is not a small thing. And behind that linkage stands the abbess, our Grandma Dharma, who insisted that women be accepted as disciples. Without her, there would be no nuns in the system. There would be none of you here. I will honor her with a formal ancestral ceremony. I encourage all of you to remember the kindness. So today we have covered two things. 1. A practical warning. Please be careful. Not everyone who comes through our gates comes in good faith. Screen your visitors. Don't be naive. The village is a sacred place, and it must be protected. 2. A profound teaching. The mind that abides nowhere is the Buddha mind. Not the mind that clings to love. Not the mind that clings to hatred. Not even the mind that clings to emptiness. The mind that responds appropriately, freely, clearly, willingly, without being trapped to whatever appears in front of it. That is what Huineng heard in a single line of sutra. That is what he carried for 16 years in hiding. That is what he passed to a general chasing him with a knife at the foot of a mountain. And that is what is available to each of you right now in this moment, sitting exactly where you are. We will continue this lecture tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. Namo Tu Namo Ame Tofu.